Okay, Liz, it's 11:01. You want me to go ahead and get started?
Yes, let's roll.
Okay, so come on, I'm Christy. I'm delighted that you're here today. You are prepared for what's going to happen. We're just going to orient you for a little bit in great specificity, and I think I'll probably say this throughout, but Liz, we'll post these slides somewhere that people can access, right? These will make
Yep,
sure
we will send everyone a copy of the deck based on the email with which you registered.
Okay, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, and then we'll have a really exciting speaker who I'll introduce shortly. Thank you, Jill, for so much for being here. And then we'll leave some time at the end for your questions. So just rules of engagement. By this time, I imagine most everyone on this call has probably been on hundreds of Zoom calls, but just since we have a nice big crowd, looks like we've got over 40 people on right now, just make sure that you stay on mute. Please turn on your camera. If you want to just see the speaker, there's a way you can choose speaker view as as I and Jill and I talk. And then Liz Berger on the JHTV team is going to run the chat function. So as you all have questions, please chime in on the chat function. Liz will interrupt me and we'll go from there. But again, just so thankful and delighted that you're here and look forward to an exciting hour this morning. So one of the motivations for working on this is the fact that in the US, while 38% of companies are founded by women, only 2% of venture funding goes to women. And I just find this completely and totally unacceptable. We have spent a lot of time thinking about how we can address this. There is also a discrepancy on our campus. While women account for almost half the faculty and over half the students, we don't see the same level of engagement on the startup and patenting front. And so just really kind of interested in how to address that and what we could do about it. So, we really decided to take this year and be really deliberate and strategic about engaging women in the innovation world. And so what does that mean? First of all, we're really excited to celebrate those innovators. I know Liz is going to put the web link in the chat momentarily. This is something where you can nominate, and this is really from the youngest students to the most senior faculty. It takes about 2 minutes to nominate someone and tell why you think they should be really celebrated as an innovator. So I would encourage you to do that. Some of you on this call may have already been included in that. The second is education. It's part of what today is, just making sure that we're equipping you with the knowledge, skills, and perspective to really help you reach your innovation goals. The third is that it's a lot easier to do all of this when there is a community, whether it is the broader ecosystem, whether it's a community of female entrepreneurs. Just know that there is a way, and it's of course unfortunate that we all can't be together in person and do some networking, but just know there is a community out there. They're ready to embrace and be part of this. And the last is mentorship. Our plan is to make some mentor pairings later in this year, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, we have some fully engaged mentors at JHTV that have built businesses and run businesses and mentor faculty and students, and we would be more than delighted to connect you in the interim. So our program, very cleverly named Accelerator, I can't remember, Liz, was it you or someone on your team? Was it Cindy or Danny or someone came up with this? I can't remember who. Yes,
Danny on our team. We asked for ideas about clever naming, and this makes you roll your eyes, but it is catchy.
Yeah, no, it is catchy. You certainly know what we're doing. So far we had a celebratory breakfast to kick off the year. We've had some work in customer discovery. You'll hear a lot more about that throughout today and coming months. And then today is really about pitching and engaging with the investment community. And we have a very, very gracious alum who works in the investment world and is going to tell us more about that perspective. So let's just turn to pitching. So for those of you that don't know me, I spent the first half of my career, a little over 20 years in the investment world, hearing thousands of pitches. And so I'm trying to bring a sense of what the folks on the other side of the table are motivated by, what they're listening for, how you can really engage with them as you do this. So this is coming really from a perspective of, of how we can better equip you to make the most of that time. So the goals here, as a faculty member, as a scientist, you've done lots of work, you know your area better than anyone in the entire world. How can we bring that to life and to market and really make a difference, have that impact that you're craving, not just in the scientific discovery phase, but in something that people use and benefit from in their daily lives? Obviously, in the as one climbs the ranks of the faculty world, there are all sorts of ways one can get recognized, getting published, being noted at conferences and things. But at the end of the day, it's I think for like so many of us, really the driver is impact. One of the byproducts, though, if you are successful in a commercial front, whether you help to bring a drug to market or a diagnostic test or some great technology, there is the ability, the way the tech transfer rules work in this country, they really want us to incent all faculty to really be part of this and be engaged. And so there are financial incentives, the way the profit sharing works when you do patent something that is commercially successful. Now, what drives someone at a venture firm? Jill will tell us a little bit more about this, but it's pretty simple. Their job is return on investment. They get money from limited partners, people like endowments and big pension funds and high net worth investors, and they want to turn that money into more money. And so they have to take big risks. They are paid for taking these risks, and in the end of the day, they do get a percent of the profits, and so they're highly motivated to make sure there is a return on their investment. Oftentimes what that means for you is that there has to be a big enough market and a big enough opportunity that if they're going to swing for the fences and take that risk, that if it pays off and if the product gets to market, there's going to be a lot of people that want to buy it, to part with their cash for it, to pay for it, to a big enough opportunity from a dollar perspective that that they can see that return. So if you, particularly those of you working in the therapeutic space, in general, it takes 10 years and over $1 billion to take a therapeutic from discovery to market. It's a long path. And so investors really need to know, if they're going to invest that type of money and time, that at the end of the day, that there is a product that will be protected and saleable to all. So, I think securing money is important, but I taught this in my Carey Business School class this year. It was on entrepreneurial finance. And one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about is that the right venture investors will not just bring money, they will bring a lot of expertise to the table. They will help you bring your product to market, build the business, and that comes from experience. They can help you put good corporate governance in place, make sure you have all the right legal strategies. They can help you find very talented individuals. Of course, by definition, if you start a company and you're raising money, then you're going to need to hire really talented people. And then through their networks, they can help you identify potential customers, potential key opinion leaders to work with you, et cetera. So if you find the right venture firm and you partner with them, you will be able to really leverage more than just the dollars. One of the things that we spend time with faculty talking about is that in this case, it's really about knowing your audience. And the audience for the investment world, for the investment presentation, for a pitch, is not the same as your academic audience. For those of you that are faculty members that have been wildly successful, you're very used to papers in Nature and Science, for example, or opportunities to speak at scientific conferences. And the more technical and the more data, the better. You are often focused on a very specific part of that technology where you are the world's expert, and those details critically separate you from the pack and allow you to get that publication published. With the commercial audience, it's interesting what the technical details are, but really at first they need to understand, the investor needs to understand really what the unmet need and what the market is. And there's a little bit of an art to having this conversation. In some ways, it's like a different language, different vocabulary, different motivators. And so we're going to go through some of that. But sometimes I call this with my team the left side and the right side of the ledger. And it's just about translating and making sure that that people are speaking the right language at the right time. So, just anytime you're giving a pitch, being simple, concise, and clear. There was a really beautiful technical presentation I listened to recently where there were 4 or 5 or 6 graphs and pictures of science on one slide. And it was really difficult for me listening to it to understand. And the feedback was, take everything off except the one chart or the one idea, and just make sure you focus on that and be really concise when you're presenting. Again, probably different than many of the scientific talks that you give and that you hear. When meeting with investors have just absolutely notoriously short attention spans. They hear upwards of 10,000 pitches a year. And if you can't grab them with what that unmet need is and how you're solving it in the first 60 seconds, it's highly unlikely that they will want to hear the rest of your pitch. So just make sure that you get right to the meat of it, and then you can really focus on some of the details. I think knowing your audience is really important. If you all were to meet with Jill, who's here with us today, it would be really good to understand her background. What did she study scientifically? What has been her path? What boards does she sit on? Has she worked with other companies like yours? Let's say you're focused on lung disease. Has she worked with other companies in the respiratory space? And so you just want to make sure, just like you would with any other assignment, that you know the investment community member very well and who you're meeting with, and often you can tell what their motivators are. I think doing the homework assignment on the firm and the broader investment trends are really important. Is there something about the technology you're proposing that will require extensive reimbursement work or regulatory risk, or is there something about what you're proposing? And all of these factors you want to hone in on and make sure that you've done your homework on the specificity of the types of questions that investors are interested in. I would say one of the things that I learned at some point in my career was the more people are challenging you, stopping your pitch and answering questions, the more engaged they are. And so it's highly unlikely, and again, I look for Jill to tell us a little bit more, but it's highly unlikely, I think, that you will sit down and get to go through your entire pitch with a given investor. And in fact, sometimes you only get through the first slide, but that allows you to jump around. So let's say they ask a question about your regulatory strategy. Certainly you would have a slide on that, either in the main presentation or in appendix. You can just jump right to that. And I would say as much as you can to embrace the question. And they might say, well, there are 10 other companies just like you. How are you different? And instead of saying, well, being upset that they're bringing that up, you could say, yeah, you're right, and here are all the reasons why we're so much better. So I think that interaction may seem intuitive, but I think the more you can engage the investor and get them to ask more questions, the more likely you are to really get their attention and show that you can really learn and be interested in their perspective and why they're asking those questions. So as far as structuring the presentation, this is the part I just want to reiterate for those of you that has just joined. Looks like we have over 60 people now, which is awesome. All of these slides will be made available. Liz will communicate that. And so the next few slides are very dense in terms of what we recommend for structuring a presentation to investors. Don't feel like you have to take copious notes or do screenshots or any of that. We will make sure. Liz, are we going to distribute them to the participants?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so you're welcome to do whatever you need to do, but just rest assured that we will get the content of this out to you so that that you don't have to, because this is the next slides. I'm sort of violating my own rules here. The next slides have lots and lots of content on them, but I just wanted to make sure in this first 20 minutes that we get as much as possible. Let me just pause there, Liz. Any questions in the chat that we should address now?
No, I don't see any questions yet, but please go ahead and start sending them, folks.
Okay, we'll keep rolling here. So, I think if there's a great presentation guide that Brian Stansky and our team at Fast Forward did, and really talks about what is the sentence or phrase that captures, again, this just kind of goes to the elevator pitch idea, and make sure right up front, who are you, where are you from, how can people get in touch with you, just make it easy for them in any way that you can. Take those first 60 seconds. We've already talked a little bit about that, but take those first 60 seconds to really describe what's the problem and how are you solving it. And anything that lends credibility. For example, there's a very prominent investor who actually sits on our board that said, Christy, everyone should begin with the amount of funding that has already gone into this. So if you've had $3 million of NIH funding that led to the point where you are now, say that. If you've had $10 million of philanthropic funding that's gone to this moment, say that. It shows that you have credibility and that you've de-risked the product somewhat already. If the pitch specifically is data-driven, just make sure you mention that. And if it's concept-driven, if it's more on the come, so to speak, just make sure that you're going to show how it will play out and how you're addressing that over time. Because certainly there have been many things that were pitched that were just at the concept stage. So make sure that you understand that investors are graded on their return on investment, on how they make money. And how can that play into the exact problem that you're addressing? I wouldn't use the usual, oh yeah, sure, this is $1 billion market. But I think the more specific you can be, and I don't mean to put up a big spreadsheet. You should have done the spreadsheet and have it in your head, but talk about and say, well, 200,000 people a year are diagnosed with this and only 20% are treated. And here's how we would address the other 80%. And this is why it's such a large market. And current reimbursement is $5,000 per patient. Whatever the specifics are that go into this TAM analysis, this total market analysis, I think is really important. And just know that investors always believe that you're overhyping. And so the more credible you can be and the more thoughtful you can be about that TAM, the better off you are. So next, what is your response to the opportunity? So is it a problem worth solving? Where there's an expression that we have, it's, I'm just a hammer looking for a nail. Or have you really identified it? Can you really solve it? Is there that overlap? And features, something, oh, this is a nice to have, oh, there's a new bell and whistle on whatever, that's really not a value proposition. And so just make sure you really hone on this. Just the last point here, this is one of the reasons that we've stood up translational funding, that we've tried to do as much as we can. The more results and data that you have towards this solution, the better off you are. So then really milestone-driven activities and conversations come next. So you've identified the problem, they buy your solution, great. What's going to get you from here to there? What's the action plan? What are the critical milestones that you need to hit? How is the product development going to work? Are you simultaneously going to work through the regulatory and the reimbursement strategy? If everything goes as planned, how much money do you need to get there? Instead of just saying, oh, I need to raise 5 million, really be thoughtful about it. Well, over the course of this product launch for, let's say it's a medical device, we'll need $80 million. The first 5 million is going to go towards building the prototype. The second 5 million will, and so on and so forth. So I think just being really thoughtful about total, like all in, if everything was successful to the end, what would you need? And then work back to the first critical milestone, rather than just assuming, well, if I only had 5 million, I could do this. Try to understand the full picture of the resources. So, one thing that investors really want to understand is, where's the revenue going to come from? Where's the money going to come from? So, here's, you sell this amount of product, it will deliver this type of margin. You don't have to have a detailed model for this, but just a fundamental understanding that this product, we can make it for this. It's not cost prohibitive to make. We can make it in scale, and we can get it to patients as needed. Those are all really important things just to keep in mind. How are we doing on time, Liz? A couple more minutes here.
Yep, I think we're pretty good. 5 more minutes.
Okay, so key success factors and metrics. How are you going to grade yourself along the way? Not just at the end of the day, does the product get approved, but how do you do that? I think one very effective way, in the second bullet point, is a table that because inevitably there will be competition out there, even if you think that it's differentiated. There was a group in my MBA class that was working on cell-based meat, and the idea that they could really harvest meat in the lab, and so that for a whole host of reasons, we would no longer have to use animals for meat-derived products. And I said, well, this is great. You have amazing comps. There's Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger. One has gone public. One just raised their venture round and is valued at $4 billion. The other one's public and valued at, I think, $6 billion. This is amazing. You've got great comps. Why are you differentiated from that? And they said, oh, no, those aren't our comps. We're cell-based and they're plant-based. And, you know, I think they were missing the opportunity to really sort of look at the market, take it in. What are the real comps? Let's kind of go for it here, and you know, really understand that. And you know, by the end of the conversation, we really got there, and they totally understood. And it was really exciting to see how they blossom. But you know, think of your sort of competition broadly, and then narrowly, and then sort of putting in a box frame of how you're differentiated. And I would highly suggest, particularly competitive, in the competitive advantage section, that you do use pictures or diagrams, or you know, what is your widget going to do that others, or your drug going to do that others can't. So this is all, again, I think we've talked a little bit about that, use and milestones, understanding the key players here, who are the founders, who are the advisors, having a really compelling team of key opinion leaders. You can do that. It's at the early stages, it's not so much a board of directors, it's the people that you're surrounding yourself with, who can really make a difference. And investors really do want to know and better understand the team. So I'm just skipping through some of this because I want to make sure that we get to this. One thing for those of you that have not gone through the use of name committee, there are pretty strict rules around using Hopkins name and logo, particularly when you start a company and the slides are really for a separate entity that is your company. Just be really careful about the brand. That has tripped up some of our investors, including in press releases and fundraising documents. So just make sure that you check in with both the brand guidelines, and then if you need to go to the use of name committee, that will save you a lot of headache later. We've definitely seen investors get tripped up by that. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about this. Make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. Is this an elevator pitch? Do you have Jill is going to hear from 100 people and she has 30 seconds to hear from each one of you? Or did you book 30 minutes with her and are able to present to her? So just make sure that you really tailor and get to the meat of the presentation in the time you're allotted by the given group. Lots of design tips that I do not have time to go through, but we'll just make sure that, that this is all posted. And with biopharma investors, there's a wonderful laundry list here of questions you will, with great certainty, be asked. And so just make sure that you have really identified that, all of the particulars around IP, reimbursement, et cetera, et cetera. We challenged the team about a year ago to put together a list of questions that when people report inventions to us, that to be able to answer so that we can better patent the technology, better help commercialize it. We call this the 7 questions rubric. It's on our website, and would encourage you, as you're thinking about a specific discovery, to really think through the answers to these questions. It will make, as you come to us at JHTV and report your invention, it will make your patent that much stronger. So, so thanks to the team for putting that together. So I'm just going to end with a couple of things. Liz and I were running through the slides, and she said, you know, you talk about a couple pet peeves. Why don't you just call them out in this presentation? So, so I will. And one of them is, so what? You know, why should I care? People all the time come and say, oh, this is amazing, and I have this great science or this great thing I've thought of, and whatever, but what is it? Are you saving the lives of children? Are you going to be able to better test for coronavirus? Are you going to be able to bring a product to market that doesn't ever exist? Just get right to it. Why do we want to do this? Why do we want to protect it as a patent? Why would an investor be interested? Just, you know, just let us know right up front. You know, the second thing is when you're meeting with an investor, so, you know, if I was on the investment side of the table, which I'm not, of course, JHTV doesn't have a fund. We have translational grants, but not a fund. But when you're meeting with the investor, or with anyone from JHTV or any sort of mentor, make sure you have an ask in mind. So if someone comes and meets with me and they give a pitch, I say, okay, that's great. So what, have you looked on my LinkedIn and see, well, Christy, can you introduce me to these 3 people? I'll send you an email and tee you up. Or, hey, do you have any regulatory resources? Or should I go through the I-Corps program? Just make sure when you have this precious time with mentors and investors and others, that you're really succinct with why you're having the conversation and how they might be able to be helpful. There's some other resources that we're including in this presentation and would encourage you to look at. And we have a number of different ways to stay connected. We have a dedicated site to our innovative women, as we mentioned. So would hope that you visit and be part of that. And then we have a number of other ways to stay connected with our group, and would encourage that. We've already mentioned, I think, a number of different things. Just again, for those of you that joined late, please consider your fellow faculty members, students, and others, and take 2 minutes to nominate them on the ventures.jhu.edu women website. So that's all for me. Thank you. That's my personal Twitter feed. You're welcome to reach out to me via email. I'm easy to find. I return all my emails, usually within a couple of hours of receiving them. And just am delighted that you're here today. We've got a really big crowd. I'm really sorry we couldn't be in person. It would have been a lot more fun to be in person. So I think we're doing okay on time. I just want to turn this over to Jill Carroll. Jill is an alum and has very, very graciously offered to come. She's a self-described scientist at heart. She got her bachelor's degree in chemistry at Duke, and in 1999 received a master's in biochemistry at Johns Hopkins. She reviews, I believe she'll tell us, over 500 deals per year, and she is a principal at S.R.One, which is a global biotech firm that was actually founded by GlaxoSmithKline. So with that, Jill, we'd love to hear from you, and thank you again so much for being here. Just really grateful for your time.
All right, thanks, Christy. Hi, everyone. So when we were doing the prep for this, I think we discussed maybe I'd give a little bit of background on myself and on our firm, and then I think it would be helpful just to answer as many questions as you guys might have in the audience. And it would be nice if everybody we heard from followed all of Christy's advice that she just gave here over the last little while. So I'll just give you guys my background and then a little bit on the firm, and we'll go from there. So as Christy said, I studied at Duke undergrad in chemistry, went up to Hopkins thinking I would maybe follow some of the path that the group here has followed and be an academic scientist, and it turned out I was wholly uncut out for that. It was just like a complete mismatch. So I gave up on that pretty quickly and went to the business side. So I now have 20 years in the biotechnology industry on the business side. The first third of my career was in strategy consulting. So this was time spent with mostly big pharma clients working on commercial products and kind of advising on various strategic issues they were facing. The next third of my career was in operating biotech companies. This was in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I was in roles there that were mostly around corporate development, partnerships with big pharma, financing, raising money, both privately and publicly for the companies I was working with, and then also sort of strategic planning and overall product strategy type of work. My dog is trying to get attention. These work from home calls are kind of funny. The next third of my career has now been with S.R.One on the investing side. So I've been with the firm for 9 years. We are a therapeutics focused fund. We've been a part of GlaxoSmithKline for 35 years, making direct equity investments in biotech companies. A very small amount of device, diagnostic, and healthcare IT work over the life of the firm, but we're really very focused on therapeutics now. We typically are seed or Series A investors in terms of the first time we invest in a company. So we do mostly startups. Sometimes we'll get involved a little bit later, Series Bs, or even later rounds, depending on what's going on with the company. We typically invest 20 to 30 million over the life of an investment, and that'll be from the beginning, when we put the first seed money in, all the way through to when the company is public and even after they're public. We're pretty active investors. We put deals together, structure term sheets. We sit on the boards of the companies that we represent. We work closely with management teams to address various issues as companies evolve. And we are transatlantic, so we have people in San Francisco. I'm based on the East Coast. I actually live in Virginia now, and I have kind of covered the East Coast for us from Boston all the way down here to DC. And then we have people in London, so we have also companies that are overseas. And we're looking for highly innovative new technology. So S.R.One's lens is really around innovation, things that are going to be game-changing for whatever the key therapeutic area is where we're working. So we're looking for something that is going to be a leap change in sort of the standard of care and make a meaningful difference for patients, for providers, and importantly also for payers, and something that's going to be meaningfully arguing for reimbursement. And that has taken us into lots of different therapeutic areas. So we have some cell therapy companies now that we're very excited about. We were We led the Series A investment for CRISPR Therapeutics back in 2015. We have companies that have spanned from fertility to sort of bone health, all kinds of different areas where we've been involved over the years. My own portfolio has an inflammatory disease company up in Boston. We just closed on a allosteric modulator deal also in the Boston area. I have a couple of companies in cell therapy, as I just mentioned. So happy to maybe pause here and take some guidance from Christy and Liz and everyone else about whether there's specific areas to address, or if you want to open it up for a few questions.
So I'll start. We have two questions, and maybe Christy, you will want to weigh in on this, but two questions about confidentiality when presenting to investors. How much to share? Do you need to have a provisional patent in place, or some sort of agreement, an MOU or NDA? So if I don't know, Christy, from a
let me just say a sentence or two, and then Jill could. First of all, it's a huge turnoff to investors if you demand an NDA before doing the pitch. They likely won't meet with you. Jill, is that fair?
True.
Yeah. So ideally, you would have some protection in place. I would not recommend that you share things without having something filed. And in addition to that, investors generally want to see that you have intellectual property protection. But Jill, anything to add there?
Well, I mean, I guess I have several layers of nuance to this, and I know it's highly relevant to those of you who are, conducting primary research. So sort of maybe echoing a little bit of what Christy said up front. I mean, I do think this is a relationship business. So, kind of networking and getting to know people and, all of the things that you can do without necessarily being in formal pitch mode, I think is a worthwhile thing to do, even if you're still driving toward key intellectual property. I think that it's kind of funny because sometimes people are so focused on their own IP and making sure not to give something up. If you think about it from the other side, generally we don't actually want to be contaminated, right? So there's kind of like, it kind of goes both ways. Like we don't really want to sign NDAs until we're really, sure that it's something that we really want to work on, because, at this point things get a little bit tricky, if we end up not working together. So, our process is that we will never sign a CDA for a first meeting, ever. So, you have to be able to have a non-confidential discussion. You have to be able to describe to us what you're doing in non-confidential manner so that we can get interested enough to want to sign a CDA. But I wouldn't view it as like a line in the sand around, is there a patent filing or not? I think that sometimes you can do things beforehand. I mean, we've done deals at like the earliest stages of drug discovery when there's targets, and we're going to take some novel chemistry approach to prosecute those targets. And of course, there's no IP at that stage. So anyway, I'll pause there. I think it's a bit of nuance.
Great, thanks.
Jill, you mentioned that it's a relationship business. So if someone is new to pitching, how do they get on your calendar? How do they get in front of you? And what are the things that they should do other than, prepare a really compelling pitch deck?
Yeah, I mean, obviously things are a little funky right now in the world, but I mean, I think that, at Hopkins, I'm pretty sure you guys do, and I know at other universities, there's a lot of kind of networking opportunities. So I think that to the extent that there are organized forums to get together with venture investors, sometimes there's a venture day, or there's a networking reception, or there's, a cocktail party or whatever, various ways to kind of get FaceTime with people and get to know them. I think, following up from all of those and trying to just kind of have some, one-on-ones, sometimes even in mentorship mode, I mean, people will usually give you some time if they have it, and if there's mutual interest to, have sort of, short mentorship kind of calls or discussions. I think, just kind of, at least in my experience, the thing that turns into something is usually like 12 steps of connection through a networking experience down the road from where you started, so, kind of doggedly following leads of people you want to talk to, asking them for introductions to other people. You just never know, kind of where that sort of butterfly effect is going to lead. And so I give that advice to people a lot, which is, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to just ask people to give them a little bit of your time to give some advice. And, you know, those kind of things can really ultimately lead to something, or maybe they won't, right? But a lot of times it only just takes one, and it's good experience just chatting with people informally before you build up toward formally pitching.